All right, we are back here on the podcast, getting ready for Champ Week college basketball. Join me today to break it down. Great fan of the podcast, covers college sports on the New York Post. Zach Braziller is here. Zach, welcome back. How are you?
What's up, buddy? How are you?
Pretty good. Enjoying this season. Been a lot of fun, a lot of crazy storylines. What have you taken away so far from most of this season?
You know, to me, there are two kind of overriding storylines. There's the absolute elite top of the sport with Michigan, Arizona, Duke, Florida, and UConn. And then it's this freshman class, which is, just incredible. To me, those are the two, as we go to the tournament, those are the two major storylines. Just a historically good freshman class with, Boozer, DeBonsa, Peterson, Caleb Williams, who's obviously now out for the year, which stinks. Flemings, you can go on and on, Michael Brown. But yeah, it's how good the sport, like you could pick any of those top 4 or 5 teams and most years they'd probably be the best team in the country. And this year it's very different. So I think those are probably to me, the biggest storylines of the year.
Yeah, for sure. Kind of go local here a little bit with the Big East here. Obviously, one of the things you mentioned, that top tier here is UConn. And right now, obviously, they're playing as we're recording against Marquette. They're going to be the 1 or the 2 seed in the Big East tournament here. They're
going to be the 2. St. John's clinched the 1.
Yeah, it's not up on my tiebreaker math here. So they're the 2 seed in the Big East tournament. They have, obviously, the great non-conference wins. They kind of had a couple of hiccups in Big East play, but they seem to have righted the ship a little bit here. What do you think about UConn right now?
Yeah, look, they're very good. I don't think they're quite as good as Michigan, Arizona, Duke, Florida. It's all about Tarris Reed. When Tarris Reed is dominant and is really defending, I think UConn is terrific. We saw what they did to St. John's in Hartford. The problem for UConn is they're fit up front, and Tarris Reed sometimes does not bring it. We saw what happened in the first St. John's game. We saw when they lost to Creighton. They've been, it's weird to say a team with 3 losses has been inconsistent, but, they really haven't been all that dominant, in league play. A lot of close wins. But I think they're very good, but I do not think they're on the level of those 4 teams.
Yeah, it makes you wonder. It's like I thought about, off the air. I wanted to see if your idea is because obviously the league is in a down cycle right now. They're probably going to send 3 teams to the tournament here. Is it possible that, that they're sort of in a situation where, they haven't really been battle tested outside of St. John's games for a while. So, there's a little bit of natural, we're kind of, playing to the competition a little bit. And you wonder if in the future, maybe Dan Hurley sort of goes to the Big East like Duke, like Shire did for Duke, and says, hey, can I have a buy window in February and play a non-conference game in February to get my guy sharp again?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's obviously possible, but I also think that to me, it's a one-off. I mean, Marquette and Creighton aren't going to be like this next year. Providence should have been much better this year. They should have been a tournament team. I don't think there's any question about it. Georgetown should be better than it was this year. They have talent. League did get 5 teams in the tournament last year. So, I think the league will be better next year. But yeah, I mean, I think, I know for UConn and St. John's, I think a big February non-conference game would make sense, especially for St. John's when you consider, usually they have a lot of roster turnover. And this year they lost a lot of these non-conference games where if they played Alabama, Auburn, Kentucky now, or even a few weeks ago, they probably beat them. So I think that's an issue, that obviously is there.
Yeah, you brought St. John's up here. Obviously, they have the slow start to the season where they're trying to integrate all the new pieces here. They make the big flip around conference play when Patino puts Dylan Mitchell in the starting lineup to sort of be the point forward here. Obviously, they didn't do the work in non-conference to have a truly high seed. I think if they win the Big East, they're probably at best of 4. So, what do you think this team can do in March?
Yeah, look, it's hard to say. I think a lot of it kind of has to do with the draw, but yeah, I mean, it's very hard to say, because yes, they did beat UConn. They did, hammer Villanova twice, and that's obviously impressive. Villanova is a tournament team, probably going to be like around a 7 seed. But yeah, it's. I think it's definitely a valid question, for them, because they did struggle in non-conference. Now, to me, they're a vastly different team than they were. I do think there are things this team does that last year's team didn't that could help them maybe go further. They have more size. They play big with Hopkins, Mitchell, and Zuby. They have more shooting. I know they haven't shot it great lately, but they're still over 30%. Last year they were one of the worst 3-point shooting teams in the country. I think there are things they can do with the right draw, that can get them to the second weekend.
Yeah, I feel like if you're Patino, obviously I know like last year you had a higher hope because you were a 2 seed and like you had the great run for the Big East. But like, I think if you're getting to the Sweet 16 here, considering what you've had to deal with here, I think it's a win.
Oh, 100. If they make the Sweet 16, they haven't been there since '99. If they make the Sweet 16, it's a 100%. It's a great year. Look, I even think. I know St. John's fans will be unhappy if they lose in the second round, but to me, it was like, look, they won the league this year. We'll share it if UConn wins here, but they won the league, and they won 25 games. They're most likely going to make, the Big East tournament championship game, you would think. See what happens there. But yeah, I mean, I still think they've had a very good year, despite everything that kind of has went wrong early.
Yeah, let's go down the line to Nova here, obviously. Last year they were a non-factor. They made the coaching change. Kevin Willard comes in, and Willard sort of stabilizes the program a little bit. Not flashy, but they've done enough to, get themselves in a safe spot entering the Big East tournament here. What have you seen from year one with Willard at Nova?
Yeah, to me, he's the Big East coach of the year. I don't think Villanova, based on talent, is better than 6th or 7th in the league. I think he's done a phenomenal job. Just a great job. They need more talent, especially up front. They're very thin up front. St. John's has really hammered them inside. The point guard is terrific, Lewis. Tyler Perkins had a great year. Like they obviously have to get more talent in the program, and I expect he will. Financially, they're in a good spot. I think he's done a really good job. I mean, I don't think there's any doubt. He's done a really good job.
Yeah, obviously a great win over Wisconsin for them. They swept Seton Hall, and the Seton Hall thing is the one I'm watching this week for the Big East tournament here, because obviously, like Seton Hall, you think they're in good shape. They have the big non-conference run. They beat NC State and Maui, and then just falls apart in league play. They get swept by DePaul, who admittedly has been better this year. They lose a game to Creighton. They 10-10 in the league here. Like, obviously, I think we're in like auto bid or bust territory for Seton Hall, but like, have you seen enough from them to think that they can do it?
I think Seton Hall is going to need someone to beat UConn. I don't think they're going to be able. I don't think they can beat St. John's and UConn back-to-back days. I think they need someone to pick off UConn. And look, I doubt they'll beat St. John's. They just don't have enough offense. They're just not enough offensively. They play really hard. They're really good defensively. They just can't make threes. They can't make shots. I mean, yesterday, there were chances, there were openings for them. Zuby Ejiofor was in foul trouble, a big part of that game, and Bryce Hopkins wasn't great. St. John's played okay. I wouldn't say they played poorly. I thought they played tough, but it wasn't St. John's best game. And you're in your own building. Look, think about it. 4 games against St. John's and UConn, and they were really right there in all of them. They were up 15 on St. John's at the Garden. UConn, they had that lead in Stores, and they just couldn't finish because they just couldn't make enough shots. I think they're auto bid or bust. I know it's kind of popular to say there's going to be a bid steal in the Big East. I don't know. I don't see it. St. John's and UConn were combined. Well, if UConn wins this 36-4 Big East play, it's hard to. I think we're seeing round. I think we'll get round 3.
Yeah, it'll be fun to see round 3 here. And is there anybody in the tournament you think could make things interesting, outside of the Seton Hall? Because obviously, Creighton began the year ranked, and they've had their moments. They've been really inconsistent. DePaul actually being good is something I'm not used to in the Big East. They've never been relevant since they joined the league. Providence,
yeah, they're kind of falling off here. They're getting waxed right now by Butler. They're kind of heading. Looks like they'll be the 6th seed. I like the way Marquette's playing. They have some good young players. I think, Marquette, it could get to the semifinals.
Yeah, that would be fun to see Marquette there because I think Shaka learned a lesson this year with I think he didn't use the portal enough. I think now he's going to be able to dip in there a little bit and help.
Well, he didn't use it at all.
Yeah.
Forget enough. He didn't use it at all. I think Marquette's got a chance to be very good next year if they can keep their three young guys, Parham, Stevens, and James, and they'll go and they'll add in the portal. Yeah, look, I don't know if Marquette could win the conference championship, but I could see them depending here where they finish, there's a lot still up in the air, but I could see them finishing, getting to a Friday night in the semis if with the right draw.
Yeah, that'd be definitely fun to see. You probably figured it had to be in the Villanova, or Villanova Pine right. That Friday night.
Yeah, look, they gave St. John's trouble at Marquette recently, although St. John's beat them handily at MSG. But look, they're not gonna get. So St. John's is gonna get the winner most likely now because Butler's gonna beat DePaul. It's gonna be St. John's gonna get the 8-9 game, and then they're gonna get Seton Hall, Creighton. So it depends. I mean, I think Marquette could get into that 8-9 game, but yeah, I think if you're Marquette, you would obviously much prefer, to avoid St. John's and UConn.
Yeah, that would certainly be true here. I want to go to a couple of the other tournaments around the area might be interesting. Obviously, the A-10 tournament down in Brooklyn is going to be fun. I think obviously you have the situation where St. Louis Press locked in here. VCU has looked very good last night. Like when they beat Dayton to basically I think put themselves right in that bubble mix here. Do you think that league can give us a second team? I feel like that's probably one of the more interesting tournaments to watch this week.
Yeah, VCU's got good numbers, but they don't have they really don't have any big wins. That's their issue. That's they don't really have any big wins, so that's their issue. I think if the A-10 wants second team, they need St. Louis to lose.
Yeah, because and St. Louis has looked vulnerable of late because I think Dayton just got them recently. They've lost the game to Rhode Island. This is a spot where I could see St. Louis, stubbing their toe here and somebody else takes the auto bid.
Yeah, I mean that's definitely. I agree with that.
Okay. Any other local tournaments keeping your eye on here? Because obviously you got whatever the wackiest the MAAC soon to change their name has going on in AC. You got some other local, the LIU Wagner situation could be in play for the NEC's babe. What are you watching local-wise?
Yeah, I'm interested in Hofstra. Hofstra's got the player of the year in the CAA, Cruz Davis, the freshman of the year, Preston Edmeade. They're the 3 seed in the CAA. They haven't, Speedy Claxton's done a really good job, but he hasn't had a lot of success in that tournament. They're going to open Sunday night, probably against William Mary. So, I kind of have an eye on Hofstra. LIU plays this afternoon. They're the top seed. They had a phenomenal year. Rod Strickland was the coach of the year in the NEC. All the locals are basically gone out of the MAC already. St. Peter's, Manhattan, Iona already lost. So we're not going to get a real local out of there. But yeah, look, LIU, Hofstra, definitely keeping my eye on.
Yeah, I think also the local angle with the MAC, I think you're watching specifically is I think you're looking more in coaches for the next cycle because I think there's obviously rumblings about McNamara being linked to Syracuse if they move on from Autry, and Joe Gallo seems to be a hot name for this cycle at Merrimack. I know Providence is linked to him already. Yeah,
I mean Gallo makes a whole lot of sense for Providence. Syracuse really needs to. I think McNamara's going to be a good coach. He's done a decent job at Siena. I think they need to. I think they need someone from a higher level. I think Hodgson from South Florida really makes sense for Syracuse. He's from that area. So we'll see kind of how that works. But yeah, I mean Providence obviously is a very interesting job. They're obviously going to go after Shirts from St. Louis. I don't think that will get him. So yeah, we'll kind of see. It's going to be, not a lot of big jobs are open, which is, definitely helps Syracuse and Providence. LSU, I guess, could open, but there aren't a lot of big jobs. It's not like last year where all these jobs were open.
Yeah, I think the other one I would watch is Boston College might make a play for Gallo theoretically. I feel like if you're Providence, you like your chances in that situation.
Yeah, I mean, I think Gallo would be a good hire. You've heard Porter Moser from Oklahoma as a possibility for Providence. Um, but yeah, definitely fascinating. Look, Providence I thought Providence should have been a top, should have been at worst, should have been the third best team in the league this year. Should have been a borderline top 25 team. The coaching and the team was just so undisciplined. Just a really disappointing year for them.
Yeah, and I know the Providence people, like, I know I'm not never going to listen to this conversation. I know that they'd not be happy they don't get shirts. But, like, I'm telling you, the guy Gallo wins all the time at Merrimack. He probably would have, if they hadn't been traded, they'd have been the tournament already. And if he can bring Kavere Kennedy with him, like, you'd be in really good shape.
Yeah. I think he's a really good coach. I mean, they need to just hire a good coach. Yep. That's simple.
It is that simple here. And speaking of something that's should be simple, it's not here. Like, what's your take on this discourse around the Miami, Ohio situation at all? I think the idea that we're using the argument of who they beat, that we have the Bruce Pearl thing about how they're not one of the 68 best teams in the country. I think we're getting way too far down the college football rabbit hole here if we're saying that, like, who you play, like, if winning all games doesn't matter. It matters who you play.
Yeah, I completely agree. I mean, they've won all their games. I mean, that's got to matter. Like, if that doesn't matter, just these mid-major teams don't even bother playing the regular season. Like, just rest your guys and get ready for the conference tournament. Like, it's got to matter. And, like, Bruce, I do not want to hear from Bruce Pearl, who's obviously rooting for his son to get in and really kind of screwed Auburn by waiting till the last second to give his son the job, who wasn't qualified whatsoever. They should be in the tournament. There's no question about that. Just absolutely no question. Miami of Ohio, undefeated regular season. I don't care what happens in the conference tournament. They belong.
Yeah, I mean, and I know there's people making these arguments. Oh, it's so easy, going undefeated. If that's the case, like, how come only 6 teams have been undefeated going into the conference tournament since 1976?
Yeah, I mean, I couldn't agree more.
Yeah. In terms of that situation also here, I do think, like, it sort of leads to, like, the hand-to-hand discussion here. This is my last thing. It's sort of like this discourse around the bubble and tournament expansion. I know they talk about potentially next year going up to 76, maybe 80, and do some weird first 16 like thing over the first couple of days in Dayton here. Like, and I watched it very closely. It's like it's hard to find 68 teams to come in here. I feel like if you're doing 80 or 76, you're really devaluing the regular season. You kill Champ Week if you do that.
Yeah, I mean, look at the bubble now. Look at some of the teams that you would have in the tournament. Like, look, it's all about money. We all know it. It's all about money. It's pretty clear. It's literally like one of the few things in college sports right now that's good. Like, let's not ruin it.
Yeah. And to be just fair, like, I do, like, write, like, a bubble column, like, for a fan site every week. I sort of am deeply versed in the bubble. I sit here, like, who do I want to be the last, like, 3 teams in the field? And I'm looking at the 8 teams that are out. I'm like, all of them would be in if we had expansion. And I don't really feel good about any of them being in.
Yeah, it's ridiculous.
Yeah, it is ridiculous. Unfortunately, I think it's inevitable. But, Zach, thanks for all the time. Really appreciate it. People, I'll follow you on social media. Keep up your coverage of the Post. How can they do that?
NY Post _ Brazil, BRAZILLE. Yeah, and you can find me in the paper all the time.
Absolutely. I'll be sure to check out your tournament breakdowns with the brackets out next week. Zach, thanks for all the time. Really appreciate it.
All right, have a good one, man.